Hi, Nancy. Hi, Nancy. Okay, welcome everybody. Okay, welcome everybody. Yeah, my gosh, it's not that cold. Goodness gracious. Okay, we're glad to see you all here for the next chapter. Thank you, Sarah, of the story. And so we're glad to see so many of you out here in person tonight. This is great. Those of you on the other side, we're glad to have you join us as well. I don't know where you're at, whether you're in Wichita or where you're at tonight. We're glad that you can join us as we share in a time of just hearing from one that has quite a story. He even has a story he could tell from the last hour, which we're not even going to go there. But I tell you what, every time we get together with the Rankins, there's always a story. But, we started this when did we do this? The first of the fall in there somewhere when COVID was hitting and all the stuff going on. And it's been great to hear some of the stories that have taken place in people's lives and how God's been at work in incredible ways. Because we all fit under the umbrella of the story, the great redemption story. And so that's why we're doing this. And we wanted to do it once more for the next probably 5 to 6 weeks. We've got the next 4 weeks lined up with speakers. And then a couple more we're looking at, and there's some good ones, let me tell you. They've all been good, amen? I mean, it's really been amazing just to hear the stories of different folks. And so we're excited about tonight. Now, we could go on for hours tonight, I'm telling you. Steve Rankin, all right, the Right Reverend Dr. Stephen Wendell Rankin is with us this evening. His wife Joni is right down here. The camera will show him here after a bit, but we've known them since 1984. All right, back in Olney, which is a suburb of Peabody, as you recall. Steve was our student local pastor as he was attending seminary at St. Paul, and I had no idea what that even meant. Zero idea. You remember? I had no idea what they were doing. And anyways, he's going to seminary and the various things, and through all of this, we developed a relationship and a calling that took place not only in his life but our lives as well, and we ended up moving in trucks together, and also we may get into that, but oh my gosh. But Steve has been an incredible voice in Methodism. Many of you have read his stuff even as of late. He's been just a bright spot. I guess it depends who you talk to, right? But at least for me, I've told you in the men's group especially, I gave a little presentation one day when I said, I thought we were just going out for pizza, and found out that this was a discipleship ploy of Steve Rankin. And the next thing you know, things like, so, you ever been called into ministry type thing? And next thing you know, here we are. So we're going to talk about a lot of stuff tonight. We're excited that Steve and Joni are back in Kansas, coming back from the Dallas area. And so I want you to welcome Steve Rankin, and we're just going to have a good time together. Here you go, Joni. Hold on to that way. How you doing, brother?
Doing just fine.
Have a seat.
Now.
Woo! I'm tired. I think you and I could both take a nap right now.
Golly.
It's been quite an hour. So anyways, let me get this. We've got to get this all figured out. Okay. Every time I was telling Joni, every time we see you guys, there's always something that happens. And there's always something that happens, but we'll get into that another time. But it involves excitement every time, you can be sure.
Not the kind of excitement you'd like either.
Yeah. So they had a little detour, and so we kind of had to hurry up and go through supper and all the things tonight. But we're grateful you guys are here. And so, and I really, we've really not even had a chance to really talk through this, just because it's been so chaotic as of late. But I told you, we'll just kind of start pretty simple. We met in '84, at Olney, America, and you came as our pastor. But even prior to that, I guess what we'd like to hear a little bit is, how in the world did you get to Olney? How in the world did you meet that girl right there? And
Wow.
some of the history that even led up to the calling and all that goes with that. So we'll just kind of play off each other here. All right? What do you think?
I'm an old man. The story has gotten long.
Have you noticed
We'll do the short version. I promise.
how white his hair is? Oh wait, our pictures don't look like they used to.
No, they don't.
No.
Yeah. Well, I will be quick about this part. Born in southwest Kansas in Clark County, south of Dodge City. And my dad was a sort of a jack of all trades. He described himself kind of guy. But by the time I was born, I'm the tail end of the litter. But by the time I was born, Dad was struggling with a call himself to go into pastoral ministry. He started supply preaching, they called it back then. And so he had this job. He was on the road a lot, and then every other weekend he's preaching in these little Methodist churches. We wind up moving to the Texas Panhandle for his job, and within days he had been asked to take these little churches. He quit his job. So point is, I grew up a preacher's kid, a Methodist preacher's kid, doing what preacher's kids do, moving around, And so when I was, I was kind of a typical goody two-shoes church kid. I've watched a couple.
Except when he golfs.
Hold on here. Boundaries. We got to have some. Anyway, so like I say, there are two kinds of preachers' kids. There are the really goody two-shoes kind, and then there are the hellions. And well, I was kind of your disgusting good kid, good church kid. Went through confirmation. My point here is that I remember as an 8th grader sincerely believing in Jesus. So, a believer, in a kind of an 8th grade way, a real believer. And in 1970, the Asbury College Revival happened. I'm guessing some of you have heard about that. Mm-hmm. I wrote a little, made reference to it in an article recently. Some college kids from that revival came through the little town. We were living in Miltonville. Dad was pastoring in Miltonville, Kansas, Cloud County. Some of them came through Miltonville, and there was a little Wesleyan college then in those days, and so college students with college students. And some of us high school kids were the beneficiaries of that renewal. So as a sophomore, I had this kind of, okay, there's more to being a Christian than what I was experiencing then. But I was still your typical teenage kid. Then we moved, and I kind of had to start over again, the new kid in the school. And my junior and senior year were both good and bad, because when you're the new kid all the time in these little towns, fortunately, I was good enough at sports that I could make the team and kind of be a contributor. I wasn't a great athlete, but that sort of got me in, and so in many ways it was a really wonderful experience. And yet, by my senior year in high school, some of these contrary desires were starting to show up pretty significantly. A desire to be a good Christian and to love God and to do what good Christians should do. And I had my little list of what good Christians do, what you do and you don't do. And yet all these other desires, and I was kind of insecure. It was really important for me to be well-liked. And what do you have to do to be well-liked? You kind of have to play along with some things. And so anyway, In February of my senior year of high school, which was 1972, we had a lay witness mission in our church, and I was in Wichita that weekend. Part of the weekend was in the KMEA state chorus. And after we gave the concert in the afternoon, we drove back home. And so I got in on the Saturday evening, Sunday part of the lay witness mission. And there was this guy, I can still remember walking into the back of the church, this guy. This is 1972, remember? So he's wearing a chambray shirt, one of those fringy jackets, biker boots, jeans, beard, hippie. Remember hippies? Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah. Don't you call Santa a hippie.
Anyway, he was giving his testimony, and someone just spoke to me and said to me, "This is the time," right? I didn't go forward. It was nothing like that. I had done that a couple of times already, youth rallies and things. I'd gone forward, given my life to Jesus, lasted about 3 weeks. But this time, in my bedroom that evening in February of 1972, I can still see myself sitting on the edge of my bed just saying, "Okay, Lord, I want this to be real and I want it to stick." And something happened. From that point on, I lots of ups and downs, but I have not looked back on following Christ. Something took that evening. It was very not emotional. It was quiet, but matter of fact almost. But I just knew it was time, as an old friend, now long in glory, used to say, it's time to get down to business with God. Yeah. And so I did. Anyway, okay, that's when I started feeling the call to preach as a senior in high school, which I did not want to do. And college and taught for a little bit, but by then I knew it was time to give in to the call. So we started a seminary.
But you went to K-State.
Oh, yeah.
But without this wasn't biblical studies by any means.
No. I was a physical education major.
Right,
I wanted to be a coach. I did not. I loved my dad. I thought he was a great guy, pastor, a regular guy, pastor. I know I shouldn't say this, but honestly, this is what I thought when I was 18, 19 years old. Most ministers I knew were shy, bookwormy types who couldn't get a real job, so they went into the ministry. Yeah. I was actually describing myself in a way. Not the shy part. I'm not really shy. But anyway, bookwormy, yeah, I'm pretty bookish. So yeah, K-State, loved the time in college. Was in a campus ministry that was very important in my life and formative. Went out to Protection, Kansas to teach school. And
listen up here.
My sister-in-law, my brother was the principal in Protection at the time. My sister-in-law said to me, "There's this girl you should meet." And of course, that was the beginning of it. So I did. Joni and I eventually met. I started teaching in the middle of the year, started in January. And anyway, we met. I got acquainted with her and her family, and the next August, we got married. So we didn't really, that's not how I had envisioned. I was one of these long engagement guys. And so, again, now I have to, since we're
dating the students, right?
I was not dating a student. She was a student, but we did not date while she was a student. And she was never my student. I just want to be, until she went to college.
Man, I just asked a question.
Yeah, I'm still a little, 41 years later, I'm still a little, funny thing is, she did take classes from me when I taught at Southwestern, so she was one of my students then. Okay, where was I? Oh, yeah, so I remember asking my dad about marrying Joni. Dad had retired by then, and he got this quizzical look on his face and smile, and he said, "Let me tell you a story." And Dad could tell stories.
It's all about the story.
Yep. He and Mom had been to a football game the previous fall. This was in, I don't know when, April or May, something like that. The previous fall, they had been in Protection at a football game. Joni was a cheerleader. Dad didn't know Joni from anybody, but he said, "I was sitting up there in the stands watching the ball game, and I just happened to look down and saw Joni there. I didn't know her from anybody, and this voice in my head said, 'There's Steve's girl.'" And he said, I said to myself, "You darned old fool." That's actually not what he said, but you can you can figure that out. And so, anyway, so Joni and I got married. I taught school one more year. We started to seminary at Asbury, loved it, had a great year there. But then we got this chance to go to Italy in a kind of short-term youth ministry situation. Lots of things I could talk about that. That was revolutionary for us to spend 3 years in Italy, to learn about cross-cultural relationships. We were in an expatriate congregation, lots of different nationalities, lots of different social classes. We had people who had diplomatic status all the way down to refugees with nothing. They came out of, this was during the Iran-Iraq war, so people were coming from the Middle East, people were coming from Albania, lots of refugees. So what a fascinating education we got. And I learned how to be a pastor in Italy. I guess if I ever learned how to be a pastor, it started there. Came back, thought we'd go back to seminary at Asbury. God just closed doors, opened a door. We wound up in Olney and Florence, 1984. And that's how we got to Marion County. So,
and you got to understand, there's always a person when you go to a new church that you kind of go, I better walk lightly around this person, which was my dad. For Steve, I think. You remember?
Oh yeah, I remember. Your dad and Don Freesting.
Yeah. So a couple old farmers, and you just kind of, they're kind of looking at this young buck and his wife who just come, and Luke was just a little fellow.
Yeah, he was 15 months old.
15 months old. They had 4 kids, and so here they are coming to Olney, and Olney, what's left of Olney now is really the church. And a few houses splattered around, but at the time there was an elevator and a few more things when you were pastoring. But you were living in Florence. Florence is 8 miles away, and you pastored at Olney and Florence.
And that first year, Youngtown.
Which was Mary Lou's home church, which was northeast of Marion, yet on top of it.
Yeah. Again, that was a great year. The Youngtown folks. This is a little church history here. It's an old Evangelical Association, Evangelical United Brethren Church. If any of you know about the United Methodist Church in 1968, so they came from that side. Wonderful men's choir in this little church, and so just a really great time. But the 3 churches was a makeshift kind of arrangement, and Olney was sandwiched in between Youngtown and Florence every Sunday. So I had 15 minutes to drive 18 miles from Youngtown to Olney. So Olney had already started worship. When I came in the back door, I would preach. I would leave during the hymn to make it to Florence in time for the 11 o'clock service. So Olney was really getting the short end of that deal, and Eugene Just and Don Freesting were not very happy. So we worked that out.
That all worked. Then it ended up with just Olney and Florence.
Correct.
And things worked out a little bit better then, and so forth. So the years that you were at Olney were 84 to 88, right?
Right.
Yeah, because that's when so these were some pretty transformative years in both Steve and Joni's life and Mary Lou and my life, okay? Because something in 87 came along called Disciple Bible Study.
Right.
And so Steve begins to teach. He invites some people into Disciple Bible Study. How many have taken that here? There's several that have. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. And so I went. Mom and Dad were in it. Mary Lou was home with the kids. We had a couple kids at the time. And so we'd go to Florence, and Dennis and Brenda
around that round table.
Sat around that big round table, and some things happened there. Now, maybe you can tell that. Maybe your story's better than mine. I'd rather hear from you anyways, because I'd like to know how you perceived it. But
now I'm curious about how you perceived it.
Well, we'll compare notes then, won't we?
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah. I can think about several things. I think for my part of this picture, by 1987, I was thinking about more graduate school. So I graduated from seminary in 1986, and I remember holding my diploma in my hand. It says Master of Divinity, and I remember thinking, I don't feel like a master of anything. And, you know, this sort of longer-term call from God was working on me. So 87, when we did Disciple Bible Study, I think Disciple, for me, that experience helped to solidify that really God was calling me to something more, which meant more schooling, which meant leaving Florence and Albany, which was hard. That was very hard. But it was better because you all went with us.
Well, and how this thing sorted out, we're taking, and Joni, you were in the class too. So we're, you know, Steve's teaching Disciple Bible Study. He takes it upon himself to kind of tweak from the material, and we do the little life grids and all that, if you recall.
Oh yeah, we did spiritual gifts.
We did some things there. So I learned some things about mom and dad that I didn't quite know about in the midst of that.
That's right.
And so we had the little, you know, all this kind of stuff. But I mean, we're you know, this is really where we want to go tonight, is discipleship, I think, because that's your heart. But so we're in the middle of Disciple Bible Study, and about halfway through, you know, it's 17 weeks Old Testament, 17 weeks New Testament, and halfway through or something, all of a sudden something's going on, and I think Steve's recognizing this, but all of a sudden you get to the end where it says marks of discipleship, and you have to start dealing honestly, if you don't lie, that is, about, you know, how you're going to answer those questions. And dang. So that's when we start eating pizza, you know, and going golfing and all things like that. But through that all, I remember clearly, I don't know if you remember this, but through it, I remember they used to have things on the wall, and you dialed them, and they were called telephones. And sometimes you had a party line, sometimes you had your own line, but you'd have to talk to an operator if you wanted to call Steve Rankin, because he was long distance. And so I remember clearly in Olney, in that little house we lived in, to calling him and saying, I think I'm being called. I had no idea what that meant, really, you know. And so you remember when we sat around the card table? Joni, you remember when we all four sat around the card table and basically are going, okay, God, what the heck?
Yeah, you know? I do remember that.
You know? Yeah. And so he's being called into a doctorate. I hadn't even got my undergrad yet. But we decide, it was kind of a double calling. We load up a couple vehicles. We load up more than that. We loaded up a big truck and several vehicles, and in August of '88, we moved the whole crew to Chicago.
Yep.
It's his fault.
Well, you know, so that's interesting, because I think, I do remember that. I think one of it's really been a holy privilege, actually, but I think God has given me a sense about people sometimes. And I that's why we had pizza, right? Because I felt like maybe God was working in this way. And that's been, you know, I've spent 25 years working with college kids, which just I've dearly loved. And so young adults, watching them come into their own and respond to what God is doing in their lives. And for me to kind of walk with them through that experience has been really, really a holy privilege. And that, I think that's what was going on when we did Disciple together. I began to sense, okay, Rick's working on something here, so let's talk.
Yep. So, like Sarah, let's chat, right? So anyways, so, I mean, it's just a crazy thing. And so, next thing you know, we're living in a place that we'd never seen so many people in our lives, you know. We come from Kansas, where there's, 3 million, and heck, in Chicagoland, there's 10 million. And, you know, Olney has 3 people, or what, you know, I mean, so, you know, 20 people, 25, whatever it is, and so we leave, and actually are going to the same, so talk about that. I mean, you know, you really were hired on as discipleship in the church there at Northfield, right? While you're going to school?
Right. Well, before I tell you that, I remember you and me jogging around the lake. And we're kind of looking at each other like, what have we gotten ourselves into? And Rick said to me, life as we know it has ended.
Yeah. Yep.
You know how Rick is with these sayings like that. So, okay, the church. I was hired on as minister of teaching and discipleship. And so we did disciple Bible study every year. I helped to oversee the youth director. And those were great years. The church where we were involved, wonderful fellowship, also conflict in the church. And so I was trying to be a student and a pastor and a little bit of a bridge between competing parties. Now I want to say this, because we don't need to get into this, but when Joni and I left to come back to Kansas, Rick stepped into a very similar role, right? Was it the same? Or?
It was called Minister of Discipleship.
Okay, Minister of Discipleship.
So I kind of followed you and tweaked it a little bit.
Right. But Rick is really the one, I was sort of like a bridge, but Rick was really the one to carry people through some pretty rough times.
And great people, that's the thing.
Yeah, that absolutely. Yeah. Good people.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
We still have great relationship with a lot of those folks, although hardly one of them belonged to that particular church anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's a sad thing. Yeah. So, anyway, I guess it wasn't too long after that when we came back to Kansas that went back into pastoral ministry, and by that time, I knew that, let me say this. So, even though I'm very bookish, I love the academic environment, I never felt comfortable getting trapped in the ivory tower. So I always had, while I was in graduate school, I was always involved in a church. So 1 foot in the academy, 1 foot in the church. And that's been, I think, another part of my particular calling is to try to hold these things together. Because as I've said a lot, the technical term in the academy for teaching and learning is pedagogy. Well, in the church we call that discipleship. They're exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. And there needs to be more academy in the church, and I mean that in the best sense of the word. I'm not talking about the skepticism and the doubt and the disbelief and all the problems that we recognize with the academy. There needs to be serious learning going on in the church. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." We love that part. What does he say after that? "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." Learn. We are students of Jesus Christ. And that means study. So more academy in the church and more church in the academy. There could be a lot more church in the academy. And I could give you way more than you want on that. But now we're getting to what I think is sort of in my senior season in ministry, it is a passion, I know that.
Well, Steve is always, he's always used words that I have no idea what they mean. But we needed the Steve Rankins of the world to be able to be the teacher and be the scholar and work in the academy and all those things. We need the people like me who are kind of the I don't know what I am, but I can't say all those big words, but I can grunt and groan with the rest of you. So we just need to have that togetherness in that. And so we're learning a lot from him, and this discipleship piece. I think if you could just kind of get us into that. I mean, even I don't know if you remember. You taught a class in seminary at Garrett. And I was your student there.
Yeah,
I don't even remember what the class was. I think it was a church history class.
Church history class, I was a grad assistant.
Yeah.
Well, golly, there's so much that could be said.
Because let's talk about what you did at Southwestern before you get to SMU.
Yeah.
Because what he did at Southwestern is still making a difference in people's lives.
Yeah. Well, when I was in grad school, I got to work with just an enormously influential man, very godly man named Robert Coleman. And so everything I know, I learned from him really on this point. Discipleship is primarily about relationships. it's more than just getting together. It's a very purposeful kind of relationship, but discipleship has to be grounded in relationships. And the different compartments or segments of our lives need to be brought together because we're whole people, right? And so they've got to be brought together. So at Southwestern, we started a program called Discipleship Southwestern, and it combined academic coursework with group experience, small groups, and ministry. So students could enter into the discipleship program. There were 4 classes they took during their 4 years. They were in a small group, and they were involved in a local church or in a campus ministry group of some kind. So it's a combination of study with prayer and worship and all that, plus serving, right? Discipleship isn't just about prayer and study and the spiritual disciplines. It's about ministry as well. And you all know this, right? All who are in Christ are called to some kind of ministry. Mm-hmm. And figuring out what that is part of discipleship. So we really need each other in that way. So Discipleship Southwestern, we started, and it's still going on.
Well,
Molly Just leads
David
it.
and Jessica, did you both go through it? Or both of you, right? So, our new family pastor, Jessica, and her husband, David, both have gone through that. So I don't know if anybody, I can't really see who's out there, but I think they're the ones here. But yeah, you're right. Molly now. Well, and in between was Ashley
Alley Crawford.
Yeah.
She was my student.
Yeah. And now Molly.
And now Molly. So, working with college students was not necessarily on my radar, but once I realized this really is God's call, I can tell you a few times I feel like God spoke very clearly and very directly to me, and one of them was about working with college students. And so time at Southwestern was just tremendous, and getting that going, takes a lot of people to get those things going, so we had a great team, and that is a good memory. I'm going to carry that one with me into heaven. So anyway.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the things, and sometimes, how ministry is, it can suck the life out of you.
Yeah.
You know how it is.
Yes.
Because, there's days like, shoot me now. But, and you've gone through those days, and there's times just to be reminded, and I've told this to Joni, because I know we've talked about some of the struggles, especially when you were at SMU, just like, man, has my life made a stinking difference or not?
Yeah.
And, I start thinking about, okay, wait a minute. Okay, so I know I'm here because you mentored me. I know that Wendy Muller-Seib. I know that Ashley Alley. I know that Molly Just. I know that Jess. There's all these people. Dwayne McCarty, who's a cop in Marion, of all people, still would mention the role you played in his life. And so there's these people that all of a sudden will say, yeah, well, I remember when Steve helped me through this. And those are those days where, when you have one of those really, really bad days when life just really is tough. Dr. Tuttle, you remember Dr. Tuttle would always say, you need to build yourself an affirmation file. Because when you're having those days, you need to pull that file out and look at those little notes that somebody wrote you or something and be reminded, maybe I was called into this.
Yeah.
So I think there's a big affirmation file for you, Steve, on the discipleship program. And so a lot of lives that have been impacted, which includes our kids as well, because our kids played with your kids and then even the ministry. Todd, is in ministry. Well, they're all in ministry, so in one way or another.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then when we went to SMU, after I'd kind of gotten my feet wet and got the lay of the land, then we started working on an SMU version. It's a lot different. Down there, it's called the Center for Faith and Learning, and it really is. It's more like a university approach to these questions, but very much the same sense and sense of urgency about college students. There's the part of the program in the Center for Faith and Learning that's most like Discipleship Southwestern. Down there they call it Faith and Learning Scholars. It's not a 4-year program. That would take time to build, but it is now a 2-year program. We got it up to 2 years. And so and here's the thing about college students. They're hungry to work these things out. They just need an opportunity, and they need to know there's a place they can go with people who care about them, and they can say what they need to say, they can ask questions, they can work these things out. That really is a holy privilege, and I don't want to start preaching here, but we are generally in our culture, in our American popular culture, we are generally failing our young people.
Yeah.
We are working out our issues on their backs, and that's a sin. We are failing our young people. They don't want to be coddled, but they do need our support while they come into adulthood. So I'll stop the sermon there, but to the day I die, as long as I have my wits about me, young people will be part of what we're doing because they need older people to invest in them.
Well, and if you remember what Wendy Moeller-Seib said, you can see who she hung out with for a little bit, because she said very much the same thing, and very important there. So, and I think that's part of, Nathan's upstairs, but some of what he's doing in the brewery ministry of going to where they're at and letting them have the conversation without saying, "Oh, wait a minute, you're wrong."
Yeah.
Last thing we need is a preacher coming in and telling them stuff. Yeah. Preachers need to stay out of there. Not because it's a bar, just because they don't know how to talk right to people.
Right.
So, anyways, that's another sermon too.
Yeah.
That's chapter 14 of my book.
Oh, good. I want to read that book.
You know what the name of it is? Why I Would Never Go to Church.
Oh, okay.
They know. They've heard me talk about it.
Okay.
It's up in the head, but I don't know if it'll ever be written down. But there's some of those things that it's just kind of irksome. But that's another thing.
Yeah.
But so SMU, I was at Leota at the time when you were thinking, when they were calling references about you going to SMU. And then, so somebody calls from SMU and says, "Hey, what do you know about Steve Rankin?" So I told him about, I'm in ministry because of Steve Rankin. I went through all this stuff, and it was like the next day or 2 days later, he gets the job. And then later on, when you were going through some struggles, I thought, dang.
It's all your fault.
Yeah.
Oh, now I know.
Oh, man. And, here's the deal. We followed Rankin's, Mary Lou and I. We went to Chicago together. They left Chicago earlier than we did to Marquette, Kansas, which is southwest of Salina. Then we moved to Salina. So we're back together again for a while. Well, then they moved to they moved to Winfield. Well, we're out west. We moved to Mulvane. We get to Mulvane. They go to Dallas. Said, "No, we're not doing that. I'll become a DS." My gosh.
Yeah.
So anyways, But so the ministry, you were there how many years? And what all were you doing
SMU?
there? Yeah.
11 years.
11 years. Yeah.
Yeah, leaving Southwestern was hard because we loved it. We loved Winfield. I loved my job. But I'd gotten to the age that I just felt like God might have one more something for me to do. So again, in prayer, this sense of something, and I got nominated to be a bishop, and that was it was really a wonderful learning experience. I was not a serious candidate for bishop, but I learned a lot, and in that process, that's how I found out about the job at SMU. Didn't want the job, but eventually got talked into applying, and so the thing I want to say, SMU, higher education, again, this is something I could talk about a lot, but higher education in general is also under a lot of pressure in a lot of different ways. And these schools, leaders feel a lot of pressure to do it the way the leading schools are doing it. So you kind of get the bandwagon thing going. This happens in every field, every industry, and that's happening to all these schools. And so as chaplain at SMU, I was encountering, they were just difficult situations. I was the interim dean of students 3 times at SMU, just because they needed somebody to step in. So I learned a lot, and and not all of it was happy learning, but in that, I think in some ways it's probably a combination of my age and and the particular set of circumstances at SMU and in the Dallas area, some things really began to crystallize. And of course, part of that has to do with what's going on in the United Methodist Church and all that. Remember, I'm a preacher's kid. I was baptized in February of 1955. I was, 2 months old? 2.5, 3 months old, in Ashland Methodist Church. Mm-hmm. I've said this many times. I feel like I'm watching my mother die a long, slow death. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, but as soon as I say that, and this is back to SMU, what we're learning right now especially is God's daily faithfulness, literally daily faithfulness, quiet, unseen, God's presence with us daily in ways that we don't necessarily think about consciously, but His daily loving kindness and His power to overcome anything. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm learning about this, even a terrible thing that happened 2 hours ago. That's kind of a silly example, because that was mostly my stupidity. I'm not going to blame God for that. But I think we do need to practice attending to how God is faithfully present and active with us daily. And it's not always the blessings and the things. It's, God's discipline can be severe. God is with us when we're suffering, and He's not thrown off by that. Right? Mm-hmm. So I think we need to learn to look with a wider scope about how God is active in our lives, even when things are going pretty bad. So, not to dwell on this, but as the United Methodist Church appears to be coming to the end of its life denominationally, this doesn't surprise God. Jesus Christ is still alive. Mm-hmm. He rose from the dead, literally, bodily. Mm-hmm. He's coming again, and we should be ready. And the way we get ready is daily faithfulness according to His grace, right? Because He's still active and faithful, even when I'm cluelessly unaware of how He's faithful and active. And practicing, learning to attend and be aware of what God is doing all around us. And we don't have to manufacture anything, and it doesn't always have to be miraculous. I'm talking about the quiet, little, day-to-day faithfulnesses of God, and often that comes through the faithfulness of other Christians. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do want to say, I'm not sure how we're doing on time and all that,
right. We're good.
But I want to honor some people. Sorry. This always happens.
Pat,
Thank you, Pat. This always happens. Mrs. Throckmorton has been dead for a long, long time. Mrs. Throckmorton taught me Sunday school when I was in the 3rd grade in Dozier, Texas. You've never heard of Dozier. Dozier, Texas. Mrs. Throckmorton. As a little kid, I went to her funeral. She lost her battle with cancer in the 60s. Irene Catlin, farmer's wife, Miltonvale Methodist Church, United Methodist Church by then. Mm-hmm. We became United Methodist in 1968. Irene Catlin. I don't remember a thing she said in Sunday school, but there were 4 or 5 of us ornery teenage boys that she met with every week, and she was there every Sunday. Humanly speaking, I am a Christian because of those people like that.
Who discipled you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. In college, those college kids that work with us, teenage kids, and campus ministers in college. But if you ever wonder about your impact on someone else, just please remember that many, many, many of your pastors have been discipled by people like you. Yeah. One of the biggest mistakes we've made in the church in general is that we tend to look to the experts. Experts have their place. I'm really thankful for them, but I just want you to know how important it is for you to recognize that you can be in your own personality, in your own skin, out of your own love for God. All of that, He's going to use you for somebody else.
Well, you think of like Lila Richter or Jackie Hett or some of these who just, I mean, these are people that are behind the scenes, but even when I've told this story, even like when we were in Chicago, we'd get a check from Jackie Hett from selling cattle. Yeah. And Lila Richter too, who had no money. Yeah. And they'd send, you remember them. And, so I mean, just things like that, who people invest in your lives and they can say, yeah. And they'll say, yeah, I know that guy down at Dallas, that's SMU. I know that guy at Asbury or whatever, because our names are still at Olney, crazy enough, because, you know, they send people, you know, and the things. But, you know, I was going to just mention, and then I want to get into your spiritual maturity project yet before we finish. But one of the things over the years is, I think both you and I have always had the same heart to really, I mean, you know, to push people in the faith, right? And renewal, restoration. Right. Some people want to call it revival. I still was maybe more of a renewal guy. I mean, I don't know, but, you know, and I remember times when we would sit and, I think we were at Southwestern one time with the group trying to develop something that was going to take people deeper, and people just weren't interested. They just weren't, you remember? I mean, it just, people weren't interested in taking those steps to go deeper. Whether it was even like one time when I was a DS, I remember you had something, you were going to work through the Apostles' Creed and some things, and I think your spiritual maturity thing is maybe picking up on some of that. But, you know, just to go deeper. And so, I mean, we both have preached at places and preached together, actually. So, and sometimes people misunderstand, I think, you and I, because maybe we will say what's on our minds. Probably not maybe. But there's times we've probably said it in ways that should have been said differently, better. Maybe we've learned a thing. I hope. But still learning. You know, there's some things that we still feel like you have to go to the mat on, that are still core for the gospel and what that looks like for the church. And that's why we say what we say at a time like this. That's why Steve writes what he writes, because he's a good writer. And he thinks through these things, and he can articulate these things. Even when others they read it and their perception already, they're already fired up because maybe it just says Steve Rankin, you know. So, I mean,
that's all it takes sometimes.
Sometimes it's just the names, you know.
That's right.
They've already made their minds up about us because we've got a reputation of some type. But, you know, it is what it is. So we will, you know, prayerfully lead people through this mess we're in, hopefully sooner than later, and get on the other side. Well, part of that, you know, discipleship is something that burns in his heart and helping people to grow. Tell them about now, the spiritual maturity project.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. You know, I said the church and the academy thing and trying to bring some things together, and that's been working in me for a long time. I have a lot of ideas that are half finished. And so it's taken us a while, and Joni's very involved in this too. It's taken us a while to figure out how to do it. COVID threw some things off. We had to switch to putting everything online until we can start meeting again. So, but then creating what's online, you know, it's been a real learning experience, and figuring out how best to do it, because let me say it this way, all of us, hang with me folks here, we all need to up our game. And Rick mentioned people don't seem interested in the more serious. We have this kind of allergic reaction to anything that looks a little too academic. And I think I understand that reaction, because the jargon and the abstractions that academics love, and I know what I'm talking about because I've been one, but it is a kind of a turnoff when what people want is just to love Jesus. But we don't really grow spiritually until we grow intellectually. And I'm using the word intellectual on purpose. That word simply means understanding. That's all it means. We tend to save that word for the eggheads. That's wrong. Our hearts hunger to know God. Mm-hmm. And knowing God requires intellectual effort on our part. And we really need to up our game. Okay, so how do we up our game? Well, we're trying to figure out how to help people with the Spiritual Maturity Project. I wrote this book a few years ago that I must revise. I hope to make it better. But understanding that the goal of the Christian life is to become a fully grown, adult, mature believer. Partly what I'm trying to do is help people understand John Wesley's doctrine of Christian perfection there. The word perfection trips people up, and so my language about spiritual maturity, of course, that's just language we know. But the Greek word for perfect, teleios, in the New Testament, means fully grown. It's not a static state. It's not you get to this point and you're done. We will grow for eternity. We will continue to learn aspects of God's nature in glory in heaven. We're going to be learning. Let's get started. So the Spiritual Maturity Project is trying to provide teaching and resources for people who recognize a hunger for more. There's more to the Christian life than what I'm experiencing. There's more to God than what I know. And so when you start thinking that way, how do you address that hunger? Then these certain kinds of courses then emerge. We need to learn how to study the Bible well. Let's set aside the 6-week Bible studies. Let's set aside somebody else's teaching us about the Bible. Let's read the Bible ourselves. And so one of the classes will be to help people learn to read the Bible well. Now, all of us need the experts. I depend on Bible scholars, but I don't start reading them first, right? We've got to learn to read the Bible ourselves. Mm-hmm. So helping people engage the Scriptures together. And we're going to be doing this the rest of our lives. So drop the 6-week Bible study. I know you got to figure out how to manage life and all that, but honestly, this is a conceptual thing. We just study the Bible. Christians just study the Bible. That's what we do, and there's no limit. This particular class might start then and end then, but we're still going to be studying the Bible. And this isn't a consumer opportunity. Disciples study Scripture, period. Make time to do it. Don't rush it. So things like that. Okay, so these 3 classes that we're trying to create to help people along these lines. The third one is about Christian doctrine, and we're using the Apostles' Creed as a kind of a framework. But again, there's so much. Once we get into this material and start to realize God has shown us pictures of Himself. They're living pictures. We can know God. Yeah. Right? We can know God. Not because we're great, but because God is, and God has revealed Himself to us, to people. This is available to anybody. Right? So that's what we're trying to do. So we're creating these courses, and then when we're able to travel more, I really do envision going to churches and helping them start. We don't know what to call it. We're calling it right now a house of study. I don't love the way that sounds. And I can explain the background about why I'm using that word. But every congregation, every campus ministry, every group, a neighborhood, it doesn't have to be members of the same congregation. Hungry Christians who are willing to get together and study on their own and get together and talk about what they're learning and what their questions are and all that. We want to help get these started and then help sustain them by resourcing them and introducing them to scholars that we believe are doing really great stuff and who themselves really love God and are committed to the Christian life and the life of the church. So we'll try to provide some guidance that way. And we have no idea how this is going to work out because I'm telling you, I did not plan on doing this in my retirement season.
I'm tired thinking about it. but it's really, really good. And I mean, this is just consistent with who you are, and consistent with what you've always wanted to do, and what, you know, what I've been a part of with you in seeing that. And, you know, I know when you mentioned the word doctrine, I was, you know, I've seen you when, I mean, I've read you when you mention the word doctrine and people flip out.
Yeah.
Like they freak out. And it's, come on. I mean, doctrine matters.
Yes, it
Doctrine matters. What we teach matters. And I mean, we could go on forever on that too.
Yeah.
But that stuff matters. And it's not just up for vote. Yeah. It's just not up. We flip a coin and we'll go however the wind's blowing us this week. Or however the culture's telling us, be not conformed to the pattern of this world. Right. Be transformed. Right. You know, the renewal of your mind, there's the understanding piece, yep. Okay? So, I mean, all this stuff matters. And this is why we're in trouble. If you're watching online right now and you're going, man, those guys are nutcases, you're right. But we're nutcases for Jesus. We want to stand for the truth and what we believe the Bible has to say about those things. So doctrine matters, and these kind of things, and spiritual maturity matters, because it's Ephesians 4, which you would preach from, right, about how we move to that completion, and on we go. So that's just a piece, and I think that's something you're going to do till you don't do it any longer.
That's right, till I die or lose my wits or something.
Yeah, but these are important things, and this has been consistent since I've ever known him, since our hair was much different color back in the day. And these kind of things, and it's still a passion of yours, and I really believe a passion of mine, maybe a little different direction on how my approach, because my brains think differently than you, but we can complement each other, and I think we have over the years. Yeah. Our wives complement us, as we know. One thing about, you can't see her, but Joni's sitting over here. Joni, come up here just a second. They need to see you on screen. Yeah, come on. While
Joni's coming up, could I just say one word about doctrine?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the thing about doctrine. The word simply means instruction, right? So whatever the field is, any sort of life experience, you have to learn, and somebody's going to teach you. Doctrine is unavoidable. It's inevitable. So the people who are anti-doctrine, doctrine divide, love unites, that statement itself is based in doctrine.
Yeah.
It cannot be avoided. So what we need is true doctrine, sound doctrine, doctrine that gives life, because God is in it. Okay.
Yep.
Should I stand up too?
Yeah, stand up too. Yeah. But I mean,
I had to get that off my chest.
Yeah, I mean, if you wouldn't have, I'd have been disappointed. But Joni is no slouch. I'm telling you, she's one smart cookie. She reads stuff. She and Steve, I can't even tell you into some of their discussions they've had over the years, but I mean,
that's a good word.
Thank you very much. Boundaries. Red River, New Mexico. Okay, anyways, she studies just as much as Steve does. She can teach as in the same way that Steve does, and so that's a big deal. Mary Lou and her are in a group with Mary Lou Reese, which is Bishop Jones' wife, and another bishop's wife out of New York, and they're in a band, a Wesley band, every week. They've been doing it for weeks, months, years, long time. And so, I mean, that's a Wesleyan thing, which is so good and stuff. So, anyways, Mary Lou, come up here too. You get by your hubby over here. So, but I mean, the four of us have been in ministry a long time together, and this is a blessing to start the next chapter of the story. And so it's been a hoot. There's a zillion more stories to tell, but the fact of the matter of us moving to Chicago together was miraculous in itself. And living a couple blocks away during that time, and our kids playing together. They have, tell them about the kids real quick, because we haven't really talked about that.
We have four children. 2 are married. We have, 5, 6, 7 grandchildren? Is that right? Almost 7.
It's your story.
Yeah. Yeah.
The 7th one will be born in May.
In May, yeah. Todd taught Leia how to ride a bicycle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we go a long way.
Yeah, our kids. And Joni took care of Kyle when he was a baby. because, he was our Mr. Surprise package at seminary, and so she was taking care of kids, and so, without them, we wouldn't have been, just how God worked in all of that. And so it's been quite a ride, and it's still quite a ride, and we're still going to be riding together for a long time yet, I believe. But, this discipleship piece, this mentoring people, this seeing that people grow into faith is really what both of them are about, what we're about, and we're glad to be a part of it. So are there any questions that anybody happens to have real quick? Yeah, Allison, I'll have to repeat it, but go ahead.
Maybe.
I did receive a gracious email that he couldn't respond right then, but he would. So I haven't seen anything yet directly in response to the open letter that I wrote, which was a stretch for me. I've never done anything like that. I've written a lot of private letters, but an open letter like that. But I've been kind of pushed to try to do a little bit more writing in a kind of public, dealing with the problems of our church. So, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah. Right. So far as I know, nothing yet. Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on out there.
Yeah.
As we speak, even this last week. Even as of yesterday,
Right.
things, and we're involved in some of that ourselves. You've seen that already in print, but we'll be a part of moving us, I believe, into something that God wants us to do that's new.
Yeah.
And that is, our desire is to be a part of a movement, not an institution. And so, if we can be a part of a movement of the Spirit, then so be it. Would we like it today? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we're trying to pray through and figure out the when of it all. So, anyways. All right. Well, Steve, Joni, good to have you back in Kansas. Aren't you happy about that?
Good to be back. Thank you for listening to me.
And so some of my quirks come from over here. So, anyways, but we're happy to blame each other on several things, I'm sure. But it's been a joy to be in ministry with them. We're glad to have them back in Kansas. Check out, if they go on to spiritualmaturity.projects.
Spiritualmaturityproject.org. And just remember, it's all news, so there's not a lot there yet. But you can get on our mailing list.
Yeah.
I blog on the Spiritual Maturity Projects. We're doing some things, but
It's on Facebook too.
Yeah, on Facebook. Yeah, you can enroll. Our first course is live. You can enroll in that. But mainly, just share your email with us, and you can start getting stuff from us. And we will not inundate you with stuff all the time. We're going to be careful about that. But if you want to get stuff from us, you can get stuff from us.
Yeah. So you get on there, spiritualmaturityproject.org, and you can read some of his blogs and different things. Just over the years, it'll go back if you want, but up to the latest and stuff. So, anyways, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's been a real blessing. I want to pray for them, and then we're going to introduce our next speaker for next time. It's going to come up with I'll introduce it, and then it'll come up with a little video here. So join me in prayer, if you will. God, we come before you. We're thankful for Steve and Joni. We're thankful for the ministry that they've been overseeing for years now. Thank you for the friendship that we've had for such a long time. Thank you for the way that you put people together in ways that we would have never thought. God, we thank you that you go before them and that you're continuing to go before them. We pray your blessing on the Spiritual Maturity Project as it is being birthed and as people grow through that. We pray it would be a blessing within the life of the church. So God, we give you thanks and praise for our time this evening. Thank you for all who are here, those on the other side of the screen. We pray your blessing on all of us that we might serve you to the full. We would pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Next week, friends, we're blessed. Where in our 8 o'clock service, we have a family that sits back in the second row from the back. I just know that because that's how people are. But the Moser family sits back there. And Scott Moser is the Assistant Director of Athletics, Assistant AD of Operations at Francis University. All right? And so he is going to come and share. He has been a coach across Kansas. He has coached in Western Kansas. He's coached in Smallville. He's coached in larger places. He's at Friends University. but he's got a story behind all of that some of you might want to bring Kleenex. I'm just saying. It's going to be one of those. It's going to be excellent. It's going to be a great time. Invite you back next week at 6:30. And so we pray God's blessing on all of you, and Nathan's going to hit the button for the next video on your way out. So thanks for coming, everybody. Hey, Sarah, thanks for the music.